to this month's Dr. Pool's SharePoint surgery session, Creating Case Management Solutions Using SharePoint. A couple of housekeeping items before we get started. You're welcome to submit questions at any time using the chat window on the right-hand side of your screen. We'll address them during the Q&A session at the end of today's webinar. If we don't manage to answer all of your questions, someone will follow up with you shortly via email. And we'll also make a recording of the webcast available to you within a couple of days. It's my pleasure to introduce you to today's speaker, Richard Pool, Chief Technology Officer of EMEA at Harmony. Richard works directly with Harmony field teams and partners. Bringing with him 17 years of experience in data management systems, Richard has helped many companies to realize significant benefits in productivity enabled by collaborative platforms. Richard earned his Bachelor of Engineering degree in Automotive Engineering from Loughborough University. Richard, please get us started.
Thank you very much, Susan, and good morning or good evening, everyone, depending on where you're joining from. And the idea of today's session really is to give you a bit of an insight into how Harmony can be used around some specific kind of use cases. In this particular case, we're talking about actually case management. And what does case management mean? We've kind of put it together as a bit of a term to cover a few different scenarios that are really quite similar, to be honest. And that could be, legal matter management, whether it's in a law firm or within the legal department of a larger company. We've got quite a few customers in that kind of area. So people like, for example, BAE Systems in their legal department, and O2 or Telefonica in the UK, to actually manage matters in SharePoint using Harmony. Also, there's a very similar use case in other kind of environments where there's a lot of communication going backwards and forwards. A lot of people involved in, for example, the client and various colleagues, and that could be insurance or reinsurance, for example, and risk assessment with the likes of, say, Swiss Re, financial services with the likes of Aon Hewitt as an example, and also tax advice. A really good example of this is Ernst & Young, who are basically implementing a tax document management system in SharePoint, and Harmony is a key fundamental part of that system, which is being rolled out to about 30,000 users at the moment. So what are the challenges around case management? As I mentioned just a minute ago, there's typically lots of communication. Lots of to and fro with, it could be obviously telephone calls, but more often nowadays it's emails going backwards and forwards between clients and suppliers, advisors and case managers, for example. And as I say, that's mostly by email, but it's not just the emails themselves, it's also documentation that is going backwards and forwards. Obviously, historically, that may have been by letter and by fax, but again, nowadays it's mainly by email as well. So we need to kind of really be able to maintain versions of documents, both internally and externally. When you're sending a document, for example, maybe it could be a claim form that you send to a client and they fill it out and send it back. You need to obviously, maybe it might go through a process of being marked up and being edited and changed by a number of parties. And there may be some approval processes that they need to go through as well. So I think, the other thing is these kind of systems need to be something that users spend most of their time in. And kind of historically, it may have been, like a bespoke system that has been implemented to address that. And each user typically isn't just working on one case at a time. They may be working on 10 or 20 cases. So they need to be able to dip in and out of different cases, be able to manage those themselves, and have a really easy to use experience. So obviously, SharePoint is the platform that a lot of people are moving to, whether they have SharePoint, just going back a second, we wanted to actually ask a poll question here. So we just wanted to ask, sorry, go on.
How do you currently manage your cases? If you could please select one of these options, either in SharePoint, in a different off-the-shelf document management system, in Lotus Notes, with public folders and file shares, or with a bespoke solution. And while we're waiting, Richard, you could keep going.
Okay, excellent. So yeah, obviously, hopefully some of you will probably in your feedback say that SharePoint, as I think I can see at the moment, probably about half of you are using SharePoint for that purpose. So is SharePoint the best solution for that kind of system? It can be, definitely. But as I mentioned, a lot of people, particularly in law firms, for example, may have come from a very bespoke system that is tightly integrated into email, and that could have come from, say, for example, a custom Lotus Notes interface. We've got examples of that. Or it could be something that is written specifically for that kind of industry and that kind of use case. But obviously, I think from an IT point of view, being able to utilize the SharePoint platform that IT have invested in, but making it the right solution for the business users and the business needs is quite challenging. And I think SharePoint on its own as a web interface is quite challenging for those kind of demanding users, because it's not a single interface to manage everything in one go. So they're still obviously working with emails and attachments, and then having to kind of switch in between that and a web interface can really be a challenge. It's different, and typically those kind of business users are a bit adverse to kind of change and changing the way that they work. But actually, SharePoint can be the ideal single platform. I think it's part of the solution, really, because it's a comprehensive platform that can be adapted to manage everything that you need, and you can put obviously emails into SharePoint and manage them alongside your documents. It means that you are moving away from having a disjointed environment of emails in Exchange and documents in another document management system. And I think the key benefit of having everything in context is that they can be organized together and categorized together, and you've also got one single repository to be able to actually find and search and organize all the communication and the documentation in a single place. So the best solution is an end-to-end one that basically integrates email with your SharePoint, and Harmony is a very, very powerful solution to do that. And as I say, we've got lots and lots of customers that have really moved from other systems into SharePoint with Outlook and Harmony and built successful case management systems. And just to kind of illustrate how Harmony looks to the end user, some of you may already be using SharePoint with Harmony. This may be the first time that others of you are actually seeing it as well. So Harmony is basically a sidebar on the right-hand side of my email interface. So we're not switching the interface to the user. It's really kind of working the way people are familiar to working with at the moment. And they're able to connect to all the SharePoint sites that they need to work with. And it could be some of them are on-premise, some of them are online, but also their OneDrive, for example, and things like that. So it's nice and easy to navigate around, see all the sites and sub-sites, libraries and lists that they actually have access to. But also they can easily manage favorites. So for example here, these are actually the libraries that I'm using in my case management. And as just an example, I can go directly to a particular library or site to actually work on that documentation. So in SharePoint, as it is a platform, it's a web platform that you can obviously implement in many different ways. When you start talking about case management, there's lots of different ways that you can implement a solution. And that could be based around using a folder structure, which a lot of people are kind of, if they've come from a file system and the users are used to a folder structure, they may implement that in SharePoint. I don't think it's necessarily the right approach personally. I think there's lots of downsides to using folders, lots of potentially duplication of data and things like that. And obviously the power of SharePoint is the ability to use sites and libraries and site collections and things, so that, for example, there are instances where you may have a library per case, or you may have a site per case, because there may be other kind of lists and things that you actually want to implement, maybe around task management relating to the cases and things as well. But one area I think that I've seen a lot of times in our customer implementations is the use of document sets, because you can have metadata that relates to a particular document set, and everything within that set then inherits that those key pieces of metadata. And then those individual contents of the document set can be managed within them as well. And I think the key thing here is that Harmony supports all of those different approaches. So however you're implementing SharePoint, Harmony can support you and work with you to make the implementation successful. Again, let's just take a look at some examples here. So it could be, in this case, I'm actually using a document library with document sets. And within that document set, I can create a set per case. So for example, if I go into one of those cases, you'll see all the documentation and emails that relate to that particular case. I can see all the metadata as well that in this case is being inherited from the document set itself. And if I want to edit the properties of that set, I can do that directly within Harmony as well. And Harmony does support all of the different metadata types that you may have implemented there. So whether it's managed metadata, enterprise keywords, people pickers, etc. And you can obviously make those changes, and everything then related to that will be pushed down to the contents of that document set as well. Now there's also, even within libraries, folders, sites and document sets, there's different ways to categorize the data. And I think that's where end users can really struggle, is how do I actually capture information, how do I present it to users, and where do I see the value in it? So one of the key things here is being able to automatically capture some information and prompt users for other information as well. So it might be like header information from emails being automatically filled in without the user having to do that, but then prompting the user to actually store some or add some other metadata to categorize further the documents and the emails that you're storing. Also, being able to do that en masse is quite tricky in a kind of web interface, and with Harmony we can do that very, very easily. So if we take a look, for example, at one of the matters here, and you'll see that if I actually navigate to the same location multiple times, Harmony actually prompts me to say, do I want to add that, in this case, a particular matter as a favorite? And so anything in Harmony can be added as a favorite, and it means that I can also follow it for activity as well, and we'll see a little bit of that later on. But it means that it could be a document set, it could be a view, it could be a view in a library, it could be a filtered view, for example. And then I can easily get to that from my favorites interface there. And they can be synchronized across all of my Harmony interfaces as well. So here, if we take a look, this view is actually organizing my content, and we've got a number of different views defined there. And for example, I've obviously already captured some emails, I've captured some documents into this particular library, and I can also represent that data in different ways. And this is a good illustration of where people should not be using folders, because the power of metadata and views means that actually you can represent the documents and the content in different ways that are much more intuitive and much more dynamic. So for example here, I can see these emails are being grouped in kind of a conversation type view. So using the original subject of the email, and I can also see information about those emails is automatically being captured. And again, as an example, if I take an email from here, let's say this email, and drag that into the sidebar, it will actually capture it. It will assign all that metadata for me. As I say, if there's any additional metadata that I actually need to enter manually, then I'm presented to fill that in as well. And you'll see that that information will be presented to me in a nice intuitive way. So for example here, there's just a couple of required fields. So I need to set the document's type in this case and the security level in this instance. So these are just properties that are obviously configured and assigned in SharePoint, but Harmony is representing in a very nice and easy manner. And as I mentioned, we can represent both documents and emails in the same interface. And what about, like actually updating some of the existing metadata on some of those documents? So if I select, for example, a couple of these documents here, and I actually want to update them to say, actually, I need to change the security level there. So if I just right-click and bring up the properties for all of them, I can then say that actually I want to update that property on the items that I've selected and say that these are now maybe sensitive. So that will then check out those items, update the metadata on all the items I selected, and you'll see that actually that's the property that's driving this particular view as well. So nice and easily, nice and dynamically, I can work on those, the metadata to actually maintain everything as it goes through its life cycle. So on that point, I'd just like to ask another poll question. So if you're using SharePoint to manage your cases, which I think about half of the audience said that they did, how are you organizing your documents today? By folders, using document sets, using metadata-driven views, for example? Let's just give it a couple of minutes. So it looks like the vast majority of the audience are actually using folders, which doesn't actually surprise me. It's, as I say, it's in some ways it can be from a legacy point of view, and I think it's fairly representative. So that's interesting. So that's great about, obviously exposing SharePoint, capturing information, but how do you actually collaborate with both your clients and your colleagues? So let's focus on collaborating with your clients first. And obviously we need to be able to capture content, whether that's emails or attachments, but I also need to be able to send information to my clients. And that may be obviously an email, with a dialogue, or it could be an attachment, or it could be both. And also, when I actually receive something back from them, how do I capture that back into SharePoint? So let's take a look at some examples of that. And in this instance, maybe I need to send a document to a client. In this case, maybe I've received an email, and somebody's saying that there's a new incident that we need to work on and work with a proposal and a summary and those kind of things. So if I need to capture that email that I brought in, that I've received, as we saw before, I can just drag and drop that email into the sidebar, and it will be captured exactly as we saw a few moments ago with another example. Now also, if I'm now sending some documentation or sending an email, I can do that in exactly the same way. So let's just fill in those properties so that a document is checked in and made available to other users. But also, as I say, I actually need to respond to this email. So if I hit reply, I actually need to send this particular document that I've been that needs to relate to this. So actually, I'm going to send this claim summary to my client, and I can do that just by dragging and dropping the document into the email. And in this case, I need to send it as an attachment. In a moment, we'll see how we can work internally with people as well. But it very often is the case that I actually need to send that document to somebody. So I can do that nice and easily because Harmony is integrated into my email messages as well as my mailbox and things. So I'm going to send that on its way. In this case, I can be prompted to save maybe the attachment or the outgoing email into the same location. So in this case, I'm actually going to save the email. So I've got traceability of the fact that actually I sent this advice to my client. We're going to go ahead and do that. So you can see that Harmony works both with incoming emails and outgoing emails in exactly the same kind of way. And let's just categorize that as well. And now what about when I need to find out if if they've made some changes to that document. So in this case, I've actually received maybe a reply to the document that I sent. And in this case, they've sent it back as an attachment again, but they've actually changed the file name. So they've said that this is partially completed. Maybe they need to find out some more information to finish it. But actually, I want to add that as a new version of this document. And with Harmony, I can simply drag and drop the document onto the existing item in SharePoint and actually add it as a new version of the document in SharePoint. So now I can see that there's I've actually received a number of different versions on this document. Just a moment ago, we added that new version, and I can even preview all of the information there as well. So being able to view the changes that have been made to the document, but also the emails that we've actually been capturing is very powerful. So what about collaborating with your colleagues? It's obviously slightly different here. That, for example, I might actually want to send a document to Susan, who's working on this project with me. So in this case, I actually want to maybe send a link to a document. And what happens when she receives that link? But also, an email may have been sent to a group of users, and I'm the first one to save it. So how do I identify that actually if it's already been saved? And if it has already been saved, how can I find out where it's been saved and those kind of things? Also, being notified about any updates from my colleagues as well. So in this instance, as I say, maybe I want to send Susan this NDA document. So let's compose another new email. Oops, sorry. To Susan to say that this is my NDA documentation. Again, because I've got the sidebar right there in front of me, it's nice and intuitive and easy to actually get that information into the email. Now in this case, I actually do want to send it as a link, but I don't know maybe if she's got access to this link. So when I hit send, Harmony actually has the ability to process that link and analyze if Susan has permission to access it. In this case, she doesn't. So I actually want to grant her maybe edit capabilities, and I can do that directly from within Harmony, utilizing the kind of sharing capability from SharePoint. So that's going to send that email to Susan, and she's going to receive that email with the link. Now if we take a look at that email, obviously I can click on the link to open it up in the web interface, but actually maybe Susan receives that, that link and she needs to, she wants to open it. If she right-clicks on the link, you can see that she can actually choose to open that up in Harmony. And that will navigate directly to that document for her, and then she can work on it directly from here, so she can check it out, make some edits, check it in. And when she's done that, I can actually see that that's happening because I'm following this location for any updates. So we have an embedded update stream that shows me, for example, who's made what changes to what documents that, that I'm actually following in a nice, easy and unobtrusive way, but it's very useful to me to be able to find out how things are being saved and being updated. But also, if I've actually saved an email, how do I know if somebody else has already saved it? In this case, I can right-click on the email and say, again, like with the links that we just saw, I can choose to open that email in Harmony. Again, that will take me directly to the document, in this case, obviously the email, and again, I can preview that, I can find out information about it. And I can also see, for example, that a unique name has been created for that email item. So if somebody else tries to save that email again into the same library, it will actually be identified as an existing duplicate in that case. So if we go back to our slides, I think the next piece of the puzzle is I don't want my users to have to manually choose every single email that they want to put into a case and save into SharePoint. There's actually going to be some logic, particularly around case management, whereby I want to automate the process, and you can typically maybe create some logic around that. So, for example, if there's a keyword in the body of an email, or if it's from a particular client, then maybe it should automatically get put into a particular location in SharePoint so that it's stored for reference in future. And that obviously saves time for the end user, because they only have to build the logic once and then apply that in an Outlook rule. And I think Outlook rules is something that a lot of people, particularly end users, are very familiar with using to organize their emails that they're actually receiving. So let's take a look at an example of a rule that I've configured here. So I've got a number of different rules, and for example here, I want to say that whenever there's a particular keyword, that email should automatically be moved to a particular folder in Outlook and therefore uploaded into a particular location in Harmony. So if we take a look at that kind of example, and basically this corresponds to a favorite that I've actually added. So the kind of flow around this is adding a favorite and making it available as an Outlook folder, which I can then use in my rules. So we can see here actually I've got this correspondence library. And here I'm just managing emails. So again, this is a slightly different approach to, for example, document sets. And here I've just got one library that's organizing all of the emails that relate to a particular project, for example. And here I've created that rule, and anything that has Ravenwood in this example in the headers or the body of the email should automatically be saved there. So if I take a look at my conversation view there, we'll see that this view is being grouped by the original subject, and everything that I've received that meets that rule has been automatically uploaded into SharePoint. Taking that to the next level of automation, what about automating the metadata? Now, we've talked a little bit about capturing the kind of email type metadata, so the headers, the subject, to, from, etc. And Harmony automatically pulls those across according to the mappings that you create. We saw an illustration of that earlier. But also what Harmony can do is actually identify topics from the email that you've received, suggest them as topics, and add those as metadata to the item in SharePoint as well. So this utilizes a component that we've added recently called Collage into my Outlook integration in Harmony. So as an example, if I've got this email that maybe we received earlier, and I click on the Collage tab there, Collage actually analyzes the email from the text and identifies keywords and proper nouns and things, and it's doing that all in the background for me. So it's intelligently identifying those topics. Now those topics you can see here. It's picked out the client name and the company name who's working with me here, the fact that it's a case and an incident, and I can also choose to add topics there as well if there's something that hasn't been pulled in that maybe isn't in the text of the email. But for example here, because I'm actually connecting to other services, it's also pulling information from those other services to say, actually, Wolf-Race Systems we've been working on some documentation around that project or that client, and maybe some of my colleagues have been capturing some incidents and some information. But what about when I actually want to save that email? So if I now take that email and I want to put it back into, let's say, that matter that we were working in before, and you'll see again just a nice illustration of I can work between my matters, between my cases, nice and easily using that kind of favorites interface. So if I take this email and drag that in and actually take a look more closely at the metadata that's been captured here, you'll see that those topics that Collage identified at the bottom here have actually been added as managed metadata to this particular item in SharePoint. And that's really quite powerful. I think that takes a lot of the headache away from the end user. And they can obviously choose to change that. These are, as I say, just kind of essentially suggestions. And we can see other, for example, topics that have been identified and added into this particular term store. So now, if I finish updating the metadata there, we can then obviously use that metadata to search, to sort, to find, and to filter. So maybe I'm just interested in items that have been tagged with Wolf-Race Systems in this matter. And now it's actually filtering that view that we saw a moment ago. Very nice and easy to digest, and keep that as a focused view in my interface. So just one last question that we'd like to ask. Do you already use Harmony? And if not, would you be interested in trialing the Harmony Enterprise Edition to see how Harmony can be utilized in your environment to help your case management with your business users?
Thank you, Richard. While people are answering that, I will ask you some of the questions that have come up. First question I see is, do users have to add sites manually, or can they be configured centrally?
They can be obviously added manually, but they can also be managed centrally in a number of different ways, actually. Typically, because Harmony is a client-side application, we can pre-configure sites and favorites via registry keys. But also, we can actually pull in the sites that you're following from SharePoint. So it's nice and easy for a user. Maybe they've been added to a site as a new member. Go to the site in SharePoint. Obviously, maybe they need to configure some default settings for the site and things, and say that they want to follow it. It will automatically appear in Harmony there as well.
Thank you. Can you access SharePoint content while you're offline?
That's a good question. Obviously, I think there are certain instances where people do need to have access to their content offline, particularly the content that is in SharePoint. And for that purpose, we do actually integrate to the OneDrive for Business Sync client. So again, as a bit of an illustration, let's take a look, for example, at the favorites that we add. So let's say this particular case, and it could be I want to be able to access all of this information while I'm offline. So when I add that as a favorite, you have the option to make it available offline, and when you do that, you'll actually it will start off the OneDrive for Business Sync client to synchronize the files, and Harmony synchronizes the metadata. So obviously Microsoft are heavily investing in kind of file synchronization with OneDrive for Business, and Harmony's adding the extra kind of requirements to that around working with documents and views and content, all the metadata. So if I take a look at my sites here, you'll see that actually I've got a couple of locations actually synchronized to my machine. One is my OneDrive, so my personal documentation, which obviously I can get to everything from there. But the other is the SharePoint site that I've chosen to synchronize. And here you'll see obviously that I still have access to all of the views and the metadata relating to that particular location that I've synchronized without having to obviously do that manually.
Thank you. The next question, Richard, is, are all permissions managed through SharePoint?
Yes, so Harmony connects to SharePoint using standard web services in exactly the same way as the other Office products do, actually, which means that everything is fully security trimmed. It's all based on your permissions as defined in SharePoint. And if you've got, for example, the kind of sharing capability in your team sites and things, then you can choose to actually share documents from that interface as well. So again, just going back to where we were maybe working before, you'll see that actually maybe I want to grant somebody access. I can see who this document is currently shared with, and I can choose to invite people and grant them access from there. So Harmony doesn't have its own levels of security. It's really utilizing your SharePoint security and permissions.
Thank you. Will you indicate if there are links to an e-discovery SharePoint site?
Sorry, can you say that again?
That's the question. Will you indicate, is there an indication if there are links to an e-discovery SharePoint site?
Depends on obviously where you want to see that link. So if you're talking about like an item in a list as a link, then we can obviously see those and utilize those. If a link is in an email, it could be to a site, it could be a link to a document, it could be a link to a document set or a folder or whatever. So maybe we can follow that up with a more in-depth analysis of what you're looking for.
Okay. Thank you. 1 second. How can we use this feature using mobile apps, Office web apps, Outlook on our Android or our iPhones?
Okay, so Harmony on mobile devices, we do have a specific standalone Harmony app as well for iOS, Android, Windows Phone and BlackBerry 10, which gives you kind of like the full capabilities of working on your documents and in interacting with them. To actually capture emails and attachments, we also have an Outlook web app integration as well, which is available in all the latest versions of Outlook, whether that's Outlook on a mobile device, Outlook on a web interface, or Outlook on the desktop. And just to illustrate that in a couple of interfaces, on the desktop, you can see that app is rendered here so that I can choose to save the attachment or save the email and go through that process. But that is also available on the other versions of Outlook as well. So let's take a look, for example, Outlook on my in a browser. So if we go to select an email as an example here, I have exactly that same app. So it's a unified app across all the Outlook interfaces, and as I say, you can do that on Mac, you can do it on a mobile device, and you can still capture emails, map header information, capture attachments. You can also send documents and items as links and as attachments as well.
Okay, this is a little long, Richard, so bear with me. As we can have email management in SharePoint, and we don't need to file the mails in Outlook as well to avoid the mail duplication filings. Is that correct? Someone's asking.
So yeah, I mean, basically, obviously, you receive your emails in Outlook, and Harmony allows you obviously to take an email, put it into SharePoint, and by default, I have that set to copy it, so it maintains obviously the original email stays in my Outlook, and the email is now available in SharePoint. I can actually change that behavior to work as a move operation so that you don't have that duplication anymore of the email still in Outlook and in SharePoint. So for example here you can say that I want to move my emails instead of copy them when I'm putting them in SharePoint. And in that instance, if I take, let's take another example email, let's say this one here, and then if I drag and drop that in, it will actually, after it's been uploaded into SharePoint, it will delete it from my Outlook mailbox.
Great. Thank you, Richard. If we didn't manage to answer your question, we will follow up with you shortly. Thank you for a wonderful presentation. I'd like to thank everyone for joining us today. You'll receive an email with the link to view the webinar again within a couple days, and we look forward to meeting you again at our next Dr. Poole's SharePoint surgery session. Thank you.